Welcome to Tennessee State University National Alumni Association Live. Tennessee State University National Alumni Association presents Far From Normal, TSU's Advocacy for Land Grant Equity, a discussion with Representative Harold Love Jr. Let us welcome Tennessee State University President Dr. Glenda Baskin Glover, class of 1974.
A fighter for TSU, to Mr. Kendrick Dardis, our Young Alumni Chair, Mr. Charles Garbuth, our National President, Ms. Joy Pick. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to talk to you tonight. It's a pleasure to greet you as we discuss the necessary and even a sensitive issue. We talk about the land grant dollars owed to TSU. Thank you, Mr. Dardis, for assembling us this evening. And thank you, Representative Love, Dr. Love, for speaking about the land grant funds that we're discussing now. This land grant, Joint Land Grant Institution Funding Study Committee invited me to appear before them to discuss land grant funding for TSU last month and the impact the benefits of that funding has on our university and what the lack of funding has done to the university. So we're aware there's a certain amount of matching funds that TSU did not receive for several years. That has caused us to have a compilation of problems: deferred maintenance, recruitment, non-competitive scholarships that we cannot offer, the infrastructure issues, deferred maintenance. So we're just very grateful and appreciative to Representative Love and this committee for taking time to hold a step in the process to determine this arrearage and how we're going to go about finding it. And so finding the funds to pay for it. So I thank you all for allowing us to have this opportunity to discuss this tonight. And I'll be happy to participate in question and answers later. Thank you again.
Let's welcome the 26th President of the Tennessee State University National Presidency, Mr. Charles Galbraith, class of 2004.
Thank you so much, Kendrick, and certainly greetings to you, Dr. Glover. Thank you for joining us. And definitely to our man of the hour, Representative Harold Love. I want to thank you certainly for welcoming us into this process that you have put so much passion, so much interest in. And we are just so excited as the Alumni Association to get involved, to be more than just thinkers, just more than just doing the work and serving. It's very important for us to become educated. So I greet you all today in the National Alumni Experience. I'm so excited about the work that we're doing in our chapters. I want to certainly thank you for the work that you've done through the pandemic, and also welcome to all of our new members. This is a new opportunity that we have to become advocates, for us to take some of the information that we're going to learn tonight and move forward to understand how Tennessee State University is certainly far from normal. You will learn so much history by speaking with Representative Love tonight. He has definitely lit my passion for land grant institutions and just understanding how we could have so much more and we deserve so much more. So as president, I definitely want to do my part to make sure that our alumni body is educated on this issue so that we can understand how far we've come and how much further we have to go. But it's certainly important for us being advocates for education, for us to first educate ourselves. So thank you for joining us tonight for this session. This will be one of many discussions that we have, but remember that the power exists inside of each and every one of us. The greatest benefit of our National Alumni Association is definitely the members. So I invite you to sit back and enjoy this session. Thank you again for joining.
Good evening to everyone joining us for our first TSU NAA Live with our debut of Far From Normal. I am Joy Pig, and I have the greatest pleasure of introducing you to the man of the hour, the man with the knowledge, Representative Harold Love Jr. Allow me to just share with you some things about him if you're meeting him for the first time this evening. He is a 94 graduate of the Tennessee State University in Economic and Finance, and also a PhD graduate of TSU in 2017 with a PhD in Public Policy and Administration. He has many honors and awards and accolades. He is involved in the community in a various amount of ways. Really, his schedule is super busy because he is such an advocate for our community and an advocate for his fellow Tigers. He comes to us tonight as the chairman of the Joint Land Grant Funding Study Committee, as well as a member of many other committees. But tonight, he is going to be sharing, as you've heard, lots of vital information about the funding owed to TSU. So I hope that you have your hearts ready, your minds ready, your souls ready to receive what he has for us on tonight. And everyone that's out there watching on social media, whether you're on YouTube, on Facebook, watching on your phone or your laptop, we will have time for a Q&A, so stick around. We hope you enjoy.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, President Glover and President Garbutt, and to also Joy and Kendrick. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you tonight. Thank all the TSU alumni that are out there watching, and all those others who are out there watching tonight. This is certainly going to be a wonderful conversation we have tonight, as we have a chance to look at Tennessee State University's funding inequities and also look for some solutions. So I think my task is to invite Kendrick and Joy back in so that we can go through some dialogue and have some questions asked and answered at this point in time. I do want to give you a brief background into what land grants are, because oftentimes the term is used and people may not be fully aware of what it exactly is. In 1862, Congressman Justin Morrell realized that many of our public universities were geared toward liberal arts education, and you had to be very wealthy to attend. And so he presented an option for those who were not particularly going to go liberal arts fashion, and also for the everyday person to attend college. And this became the 1862 Land Grant Act, whereby the federal government would actually, again, give land to every state in the union for them to establish a public university, with the agreement that the federal government not only would give them land, but also give them money, and the state would match that. Well, the problem with that was that those particular state institutions had restrictions upon who would be able to enroll. Particularly, would not allow African Americans to enroll in their colleges and universities. Because Morrell was concerned about this can you hear me? 1890.
All right, Representative Love, we are so excited that you're sharing all this with us, but it seems that we're having just a little bit of technical difficulty. So if you all will bear with us as we fix the sound really quickly.
Okay. Can you hear me on my end?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Yes.
It kept saying that the host was muting me. Did you hear anything I said?
Yeah, we heard a
start
big
from the
piece.
beginning.
Yeah, so absolutely. If you can give us a little bit more about
right.
that, I think there was some spotty connection on our end. So
Okay.
yeah, if you can go ahead and give us, a little bit more information about the land grant.
Very good. So Justin Morrell established the 1862 land grants with the purpose of the federal government giving land to every state in the union, and they would establish universities that would teach things around agriculture and things around other sciences, and of course, be open for everybody to attend. But those colleges did not allow African Americans to enroll. Because he saw this as a problem, he then brought forth legislation creating the 1890 Land Grant Act. Now, in this particular act, there was not a land grant, but there was money given to those states to establish universities for African Americans to attend. And so we put in the legislation a provision that said you could not deny admission based upon race. And so that's why you have now 19 HBCUs, because these schools were primarily established in the formerly Confederate states. So you fast forward and you take a state like Tennessee, where the 1862 land grant is the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, and the 1890 land grant is Tennessee State University. Those schools' provisions for funding are identical. By that I mean that each school is supposed to receive a what we call $1-to-$1 match from the state government to match what the federal government would send down for those particular federal funding formulas. And so I want to pause now and tell our audience, just bear with me, because there's going to be a lot of new phrases and words that we're going to be using, things like matching, things like waiver, things like funding disparities. So just bear with me as we go through this process. It's a lot to digest. So the institutions were supposed to be funded equally, and the funding percentage from the federal government was going to be determined by what the state legislature requested from the state government. And the funding percentage of the federal money was based upon the population divide in the state. So, for example, in Tennessee, with 75% of the population being Caucasian and 25% being African American, that was the percentage of the federal money coming down. So that was to be received by each institution, 75% going to University of Tennessee and 25% going to Tennessee State University. So that means that 75% of the money from the federal government was supposed to go directly to UT, 25% directly to Tennessee State. Then the state government would match those dollars on a one-to-one basis. If UT received $10 from the federal government, they would receive $10 from the state government. If Tennessee State received $10 from the federal government, they were supposed to receive $10 from the state government. So this was the foundation of these particular schools. Now, I want to pause here and list out that in the land grant provision, there are several categories of funding. For example, in 1887, the Hatch Act was passed, and this particularly focused on agricultural experimentation. So they expected the colleges to conduct experiments. And then in 1914, the Smith-Lever Act was passed to create extension agents and cooperative extension, because they felt as though if you conducted experiments and you learned how to grow food better, you need to get out to the farmers. But this also created a divide within the 1862 and 1890 land grants, because those 1890 land grants couldn't receive that funding. So the 1962 McIntyre-Stennis Act was passed, and the 1977 Evans-Allen Act was passed to specifically allow 1890 land grants to get similar funding to the Hatch Act and the Smith-Lever Act. But they all were supposed to be getting funding from the federal government from the very day of their existence. So for Tennessee State, from 1913 on, because it started in 1912, but from 1913 on, funding, and for UT from the day of their exception and organization on to get their funding. So let me bring you forward to when my father first got elected in 1968. And he and Alvin King, a state representative out of Memphis, discovered that Tennessee State was not getting their fair funding. They weren't getting their $1-to-$1 match. So they formed a committee in the House of Representatives, and they did research, and they produced this report. This report called The Special Financial Needs of Negro Universities from 1970, detailing the money that Tennessee State did not get in its one-to-one match. They, in this report, also listed out recommendations to equalize the funding. So that was in 1970. All right, so I want you to get that date in your mind. That was in 1970 when that was done. And they had recommendations. They had data. For example, they discovered that in 1970, of the federal funds that came down to Tennessee, there were $4,500,000 that were sent down, $4,510,000 sent down to Tennessee to be split among the University of Tennessee and Tennessee State on a 75-25% basis. And unfortunately, out of that $4,510,000, Tennessee State was supposed to get $1,125,000, but they received $55,000. So instead of getting 25,000, instead of getting 25%, they got 1%. All right, so that was in 1970. So you fast forward, I first got elected in 2012, and my concern was, make sure Tennessee State, among the other colleges in my district, were being treated fairly. So I had a conversation with the Dean of Agriculture and asked him if there was anything I could do to help with Tennessee State. And he said, Representative Love, we'd like to get our full state match. So I said, well, you all haven't gotten it all this time? This is in 2013, elected in 2012, sworn in 2013. He said, no, he said, we've gotten different categories fulfilled. Like they may have had a portion of the McIntyre Stennis, they may have had a full amount of the Evans Allen, but there was still $1 million of state match they had not received. And let me give credit here to those who worked in the past to get this done. Representative Barbara Cooper in the late 90s worked with the Black Caucus to get a good portion of TSU's match fulfilled. Senator Brenda Gilmore, when she was in the House of Representatives as Representative Gilmore, she got a good portion of those categories fulfilled as state matches. So there was still one category left. And so my point always to my colleagues was these institutions were both funded by the federal government. They should be funded by the state government. And so we pushed and worked and finally got Tennessee State's full complement of their state match around 2015 for the 2016 cycle. So now going forward, Tennessee State receives its full one-to-one match going forward in all their categories. So after working on this, I began to ask myself the question, what about those years when they didn't get it? What about those years 2015 back? What did it look like? Were there years when they didn't get full funding and they needed to get some other things done? So I began to do some research and looked at Tennessee State's records and discovered that Tennessee State had records going back to about 2000, which showed gaps in their funding from the state. And we began to work with the budget office on getting that research done. And the amount we came up with from 2000 to 2016 was $37 million in state matching that had not been given to Tennessee State. So we worked on getting some things done. Let me give credit to Senator Bo Watson and Senator Frank Nicely and Governor Haslam at the time, who worked also with Speaker Beth Harwell and Chairman Harry Brooks, and also Chairman Charles Sargent with the Finance and Ways Committee to get TSU their funding. We worked on now getting the arrearage from 2016 and put together a plan. So we got in the state budget $1.9 million recurring for Tennessee State to specifically go to their food safety program that they were developing, and also to the forestry program in the nursery down in McMinnville, $800,000 recurring for that. So I want to give you that back before I give you this deep dive into where the real problem lies. So I began to ask myself the question, how much is really in arrearage? Now, here's what I want you to know that's important. The federal government required 1890 land grants. If they did not have their full state match, they could ask for a waiver. They could ask, if they were going to get $4 million from the federal government and they only got $2 million from the state government, they could ask for a waiver, and in that year they could use the $2 million as the match. But there were also some years when Tennessee State didn't get any money from the state government, but they still had to justify and prove that they got a match requirement, which means that as a university, the president is then forced to pull money from unrestricted funds. So let's say particularly that in one year, the president is looking at using unrestricted funds and reserves to enhance the resident halls. Well, that year they don't get the match. They must pull from those dollars designed for that to then go and make the match. Let's say in the next year, the president has money in the reserves and has raised money to provide more student scholarships, but they don't get their state allocated match. Well, in that year, they are forced to then use those reserves to make that state match to satisfy the federal government so they don't lose that federal government money funding. But let's say also in the next year, they have money they've raised and have money in the reserves to set aside in their endowment, right, to grow and to provide student scholarships for long-standing years. But that year they don't receive the match. They must use those dollars that they had intended to put into the endowment that were unrestricted to make that match. And so you see the pattern here of whether student scholarships that they were planning on implementing, or raises for faculty and staff, or maintenance of the infrastructure, things like the power grid, things like resident halls, things like the grounds on which students walk. All these instances are where the match was required by the federal government and the state was not providing it. So I said, let me embark on trying to figure out how much is owed, because what people may not understand is when the university has to keep doing this, then they're not able to provide the necessary maintenance of buildings. And again, the increased student scholarships and faculty raises and put money in endowments. For example, there are some 1862 land grants that individually have a larger endowment than all the 1890 land grants combined.
Mm.
There's some 1862 land grants that have $1 billion of an endowment, and the endowment of all the 1890 land grants only comes to about 740 million, because they kept getting their match and their money. Now, here's the problem. Tennessee State's records only go back to 2000. They don't go back that far because they don't have those budget books. So one day I just embarked upon going up to the state archives in our building here at Cordell Hall in the Legislative Library, and I just began writing down every allotment that went to UT. And when I saw Tennessee State was not in the budget book, then I realized that TSU did not get their state match that year. And so I chose a time of period from 1955 to 2000 just to see how much money would be owed to Tennessee State. So when we say the arrearage, we're talking about the fact that, of course, all this money that did not go to Tennessee State wasn't held back from agriculture. The big chunk of it was held back from, again, TSU's reserves and money that they had raised to try to improve the campus. So I do want to pause here and give credit to Speaker Cameron Sexton and Lieutenant Governor McNally, because of my insistence that things just weren't right with Tennessee State, and they weren't going to be right until we got to the bottom of this. Every year I kept coming back asking for more money, and I kept getting denied. They said, well, look, we're just going to form a committee to fully investigate how much Tennessee State has been denied by the state of Tennessee, and then we're going to go and find a way to cure that. So I want to give that background. I know it's a lot to digest, but believe me, it's worth it, particularly when you know that a report was written in 1970 that tried to stop the bleeding 50 years ago, and their recommendations were not heeded then.
Yes.
Is that enough?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, as we've dialogued before, and done an episode on the podcast, we Kendrick and I have heard this presentation before, but now hearing it all over again, it's just kind of like, where do we even begin to understand why all of this is happening? Of course, we can give lots of credit to racism, and we can give lots of credit to people just absolutely not caring about Tennessee State. But to hear how I'm going to use Kendrick's words, to hear how the government in so many ways has tried to keep Tennessee State under the thumb of oppression all these years, really. It's astounding to hear about it all over again. And I'm keeping my thumb on social media. We have lots of people watching and lots of people interacting with you, and just, again, in utter disbelief and in shock of the facts that you're sharing.
Yeah, and I think since last we talked, I'm not sure if I shared this with you on the podcast, but I think we didn't have some information when I talked to you all. We actually discovered the original law from 1913, which described how the federal allocation was going to be divided. And in that state law, I have a copy of it here. It describes that UT's allocation will go straight to UT, but Tennessee State's allocation went to the state treasurer first, and then Tennessee State. And let me pause here and make something also very clear to everybody. This is not a UT versus TSU thing. All right, this is not an institution of higher education versus another one. I encourage all institutions, whether it's Austin Peay, Memphis State, UT Chat, UT Martin, to get as much as they need from the state of Tennessee to fund their initiative. So I want to be very clear about that. This is not a UT versus TSU. This is two land grants that work together, and they work cooperatively, but one was giving more funding than the other. And also, let me say this is not just a Tennessee thing. Even though we're focused on Tennessee State because we're graduates of TSU, this is happening and has happened all across the nation. If you look at any 1890 land grant, you'll discover that none of them have received their state match since their inception. So this is a broader conversation to be held about, what it looks like to fully fund these institutions, and also understand that these dollars that were used to fulfill the waiver request. Again, think about that. Every time there's $100,000 or $1 million that went to fulfilling the state's match request, that's $1 million that could have gone towards scholarships, to building maintenance, and other things.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I mentioned particularly on the podcast was understanding the present day value of money that was supposed to be given, in the earlier 20th century, and understanding that, in 1915, $50,000 is very much different in today's equivalency. And so can you, as we kind of wrap our heads around it and kind of get a more of an understanding, it's kind of understanding like the path and way forward for this initiative.
All right. So the committee was formed and we are to operate until June of 2021. And to date, we have had the director of HBCU Success from the Tennessee Higher Education Commission to come and present to us, to give us the background of HBCUs and land grants specifically. We've also had the state budget office, the House budget office, to give us an overview of the funding that Tennessee State and University of Tennessee received from their land grant proportions. We've also had Dr. Glover to come to present to really tell us, what the university has done with the success they've had, even though they haven't received all their funding. And so we're going to have the House Budget Office come and present to us that actual number because they've done the research out of those same budget books that I looked at. And so they have the actual numbers of what amount Tennessee State did not get. And I think that's going to be the place where we will launch probably in March. We're going to have a meeting in February to have University of Tennessee come in and testify about what they've been able to do with their land grant money. But the March meeting, where we'll have the actual number, is I think one of the more important meetings, because that's been the conversation that we've had to get to, is what is the actual number. Now, I know that people will say, well, let's sue and let's take them to court. But let me say this right here. This is the largest step that we have taken toward this since this committee report was formed in 1970, because we have an actual committee working now. Social media and live streaming of the committee meetings is happening. And genuinely, the governor and the Speaker of the House and the Speaker of the Senate, the chairs of both the House and Senate Finance, Ways and Means Committee, we all are working together to resolve this, because this can be a model for how other states resolve their issues with their 1890 land grant institutions not being funded properly. And so for me, the value of a dollar from 1970 to 2016, 2020, I'm not sure, you can put in calculations for that, but I think for me that the issue really is looking at and seeing what was withheld in that particular year, in that time frame from 1955 to 2000.
And there's so much wealth of information, and I think a lot of alums, based on the comments that are coming in, are truly astonished to see such indiscrepancies, and as well as inequity as relates to funding of the state's only HBCU, public HBCU. And so with that said, I want to bring up the president of the university, as well as the president of the National Alumni Association, to have a little bit further conversation about TSU's impact and what we can do to move forward to support this initiative. Give me 1 second.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
We can, Dr.
Great,
Glover.
great.
Dr. Glover, can we hear you as well?
I can
Oh,
hear you. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
yes, ma'am, we can.
Okay.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
So we are back, and so let's, where do we go with this information? We all have different stakeholders here. We all are alumni of the university, and as we kind of move forward, we are looking to be one of the nation's models of this, based on the press that we've been getting and understanding in the era of social media. Word does travel fast, and so we wanted to have this particular far from normal section to talk about, what we can do to mobilize our particular stakeholders with the information that was shared and information that's coming down the pipeline, to make sure that we are, responsible at this time to continuously fighting the charge to make sure that the university can truly succeed with all financial funds. So,
Thank you.
mhm.
I'll go first. Well, first, I want to thank Reverend Love for the role he is playing in this. It's just phenomenal. And we decided to let the committee take the lead in doing this. Our role as a university, we did the first schedule to put together how much money we thought we were owed. We came up with 38, 39. In fact, we came up with a number of, Reverend Love will tell you, slightly lower than what they came up with when they went back through it and verified it. So we were their number. But I guess it took us a couple of weeks to pull our numbers together. We only went back to 2000 now. From 2000, there are three periods of time. There's a period from where we are now back to 2000. There's a period that he's talking about from 1955 up until 2000 that we don't quite have together. They're taking the lead and we're just going to assist. And then there's the amount of funds that went to the Treasury that we just didn't get, that TSU never got. So those are the three buckets. I guess the fourth bucket would be the cost of lost opportunities.
Mm.
There were times when we didn't have funding. We had electrical grid problems. We had water problems. We have infrastructure problems. We were not competitive in giving scholarships. We think we have a student already ready to come to TSU, and that student's gone somewhere else because they got a better package. So it took away some of those opportunities. We have somebody in our College of Business building that model to see what's their cost, and if we have another category, is how much interest we've lost on all the funds that we didn't get. So, but I'm not sure we're going to pursue that or not. Dr. Love and I are going to talk about that. And TAC and TSU will be, THAC, the TSU Board of Trustees and the TSU management will be talking about how the process that we'll go through forgiveness. And we will call you in when we need the alumni. We told Dr. Love and I were talking, we said the best way to do this is, since the committee started this, that's the credibility of it in the state legislature. Let them at least come up with the dollars that are owed. And then once they do that, because we know for a fact of 38 million, because that's documented, an internal auditor has looked at it, and we're clear on that 38 million. But it's the amount from 2000 back that we're still calculating. So once we get that together, and the committee has turned over a dollar amount, then TSU, THAC, and the legislature, all the parties involved, will start negotiating. Because you all know, if you borrow money from a bank and they owe you, and you owe the bank money, they're not going to say, okay, it's been a long time, just forget it, you don't owe me anymore. That's not how it works. We're owed funds, and we plan to do whatever it takes to get the money we owe from the state of Tennessee.
Absolutely.
This is so beautiful.
Yeah, if I could interject there, we have some people, of course, watching and listening. And one of the questions that that I see kind of repeated a few times, and listening to you all speak, it seems that there is a lot of onus on TSU to do the investigation, to do the math, to crunch the numbers. And of course, Representative Love, you are a state representative, but you're kind of a TSU voice in this as well. I guess they're wondering, what is the accountability of the state government as a whole, or the individuals who are responsible for land grants and whatnot? What is their accountability? What are their responsibilities, their onus? What can we look for them to be doing as it pertains to the money owed TSU and any other university that is owed funds?
So let me address that. One of the things that Morrell hoped, and I don't want to speak for him, but I can just, based on his writings and his legislation, Morrell hoped that following the Civil War, that he could establish these colleges and everybody would do what was fair with the 1862 land grants. And when he saw that those land grants weren't being fair, he put a provision in the new legislation of 1890 to say you cannot deny admission based upon race. And that got that situation straight. He thought that by saying to state governments, if you don't give these institutions the state match, then we withhold the federal money. He thought that would be the stick, right, and the carrot. But what discovered was institutions, some still just didn't give the money. And so I know it seems as if the onus has been on Tennessee State, but I do want to tip my hat to all the former presidents and the current president, because they kept the doors of Tennessee State open with all these challenges. They kept graduating students. They kept buildings being built. They kept teachers being paid. People don't understand how the budget process at a government level works. You put something in the budget in the beginning of session, it may be out by the time the budget gets passed. And so for the university to still be able to function properly is nothing short of a miracle. Now, what responsibility does the state government have for the lack of funding? That's what this committee is doing. We are the responsibility. We are the ones who are looking back and saying, for example, I am, along with my 99 House members and 33 Senate members and the governor, we are the current stewards of state government. We are the ones who will make policy to improve the lives of all Tennesseans. Every session, we pass laws and enact policy to improve those lives. Every session, we go back and look at something we passed last year and say, well, maybe we need to improve upon that. Maybe we need to make tweaks here. We go back and correct actions that were done by a previous General Assembly. And so for me, that's the approach I'm taking here, is to say, there's not one person who's responsible for TSU's underfunding. It was the stewards of that time. It was the stewards of 1914 and 1916 and 1950 who did not allocate the funding properly. And it's our responsibility, I believe, now to put in place those corrective actions. And I want people to understand, this committee is not just window dressing. This committee is active and is going to do this work. And again, this is the only committee that I know of, and I'm open to be corrected. This is the only committee in the entire United States dealing with 1890 land grant arrearage funding. And so I'm saying we've taken huge steps toward rectifying this problem. And so what will be done? So I'll question in the comments about, well, when will it get the money? Well, we're in budget season right now. And as Dr. Glover said, my hope and desire is to allow Dr. Glover and the Board of Trustees of Tennessee State to be in conversation with the Tennessee Higher Education Commission about the solution to how to cure this. Now, I'm gonna tell you why. This is not gonna be Harold Love's plan. I'm not gonna have y'all blaming me for what building you wanted and didn't get that building. All right. So this is going to be the president of the university, because she is the chief steward of the university and the trustees and the Higher Education Commission. My job and the lane I'm in is to make sure that the money gets there. And so for me, that's the best direction to go in, is to do that, and to make sure that my colleagues and I hold state government accountable for the arrearage.
Great. So this question is for President Galbraith. So as the alumni, we love TSU, right? TSU has done so much for our upbringing and our rearing. How do you want to see, let me make sure I ask this right, how do you want to see the alumni body be sort of or take initiative in this effort, right? I think a lot of people are perhaps waiting for marching orders. But how would you like to see the alumni body take ownership themselves in their respective fields, and their experience and their know-how? How would you like them to take what they already have and develop it into something that can also add to this advocacy for TSU getting these funds, add to this whole purpose of TSU really gaining all the recognition and everything that that TSU was owed? How would you like us to say, you know what, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to start it next week?
Yeah, this has been an excellent discussion. Every time I've engaged with Representative Love, I have something, a feeling inside of me. And it's that sometimes it's been anger, sometimes it's been excitement, sometimes it's been a passion. And what I've determined that it's more than glad. We have to be more than glad we went to TSU. Glad is a wonderful feeling, but we have to start taking ownership. We have to start taking action, and we have to start holding ourselves accountable. I know that Dr. Glover hears a lot of statements of Dr. Glover should do this. Let's take accountability. I know that Representative Love, being a representative, hears a lot of how he can be more accountable. But we as TSU alumni of all ages across the globe, we have to be more than glad, and we have to be willing to hear the issues of our organization and our university, but also hear what are the organized efforts. And so my goal tonight in partnering with both of you, you all are doing an excellent job getting the words out. So thank you, Kendrick and Joy. Our opportunity that we have is to partner and become educated voices, educated alumni who can speak one voice. A lot of times we get in social media, we get in our day-to-day conversations, and we speak our opinions. We never want to take anyone's opinion away, but we want to have educated opinions. We want to have educated conversations so that we can move in the same direction. I am so proud of the alumni that have come from a university that has experienced lack. And it is very, very, very important that we understand that we're all a part of making sure that Tennessee State University gets what we are due and what we are just. So the first step is tonight. The first step is us understanding and learning the process, learning who the people of accountability are so that we can partner with them and not blame them, so that we can assist them and not accuse them. That is what the goal is that I would have as the national president for the Alumni Association to get involved. I share with you, Dr. Glover, and I share with you, Representative Love, we must work with you and we must work inside of your goals. My job is not to create a new set of goals. So I am ready to receive marching orders from both of you. And what my goal is to get an army of Tennessee State University Tigers ready to back you up all the way to the Capitol and beyond.
Thank you. Let me see if I can answer the question this way. I would approach the question like I would any bill that I'm carrying. If I'm carrying a bill and an interest group wants to see that bill passed, I'm going to always say to them, let me get you on the same page with me with what the legislation does, and let me work the committee system. And if I see the bill's in trouble, then I'm going to call you to come down to the committee meeting. Right? If I see the bill's in trouble, I'm going to call you to write my colleagues and let them know who is all interested in this bill and get it passed. So I'm approaching the same perspective that the committee's working, but I wanted to educate everybody about this. And I saw a few questions in the chat, if I could answer those also, about legislation. The Congressional Black Caucus 3 years ago, I believe, in the Farm Bill, put a provision in requiring states to report to them the actual amounts of funds going to both 1862 and 1890 land-grant institutions. So I took that same language and mirrored it, and in Tennessee passed legislation requiring THEC to report to the legislature every year the amount of funds going to both land grants. And so this year we got our first report. So we now have eyes even on that to prevent this from happening ever again. So I just want to let folks know that we are working even on preventive measures to keep that from happening. But let's get educated about this land grant piece. Let's get educated about the normal school piece, which is another conversation about normal school money, but I don't have time for that right now. But let's get educated about the land grant money. And that way we're all informed and understand this. we all have a linked fate. None of us can dare go off and declare that I've got my degree, I'm gonna leave, and I'm gonna see y'all later on at homecoming. I got a linked fate. I could not sit here and allow the university to suffer and not do anything. And so I felt a responsibility, and I want alums to also, where you can, when we get to the place after March, we'll know those numbers, and then I want you to be ready to mobilize and be ready to push this plan through for the curing of this arrearage.
There's also movement at the federal level. And speaking with the Biden administration as late as the day before yesterday, they met with HBCU presidents, and we talked about the land grant issue. And people are happy to hear that Tennessee is, your name came up, Representative Love. They're happy to see that Tennessee is taking a lead in this, because the HBCU community is watching this because they want to have a model. Representative Alma Adams from North Carolina was saying that A&T has an issue. The other HBCUs have talked to her about not getting their proper match. So they're considering some type of penalty at the federal level, whether it's holding back some of the funding. We don't know yet, but I am going to work with them on that. And so that's going to be very, very important to HBCUs, to land grants, to have some federal backing, some teeth in it, because all they do now is require a match. Mm-hmm. There's no penalty for not matching it. Dr. Love came by and tried to put some teeth in it by trying, you model the legislation as much as we could at the state level. Well, not as much as we could, but it's a step in the right direction at the state level. But I think having the federal backing as well as the state requirement, I think that's going to help out a lot. Don't know what's going to happen right now. Some other things are in front of it, but we suspect it's going to happen this year.
Okay, so we do have some other questions, and thank you for that. Representative Love, you mentioned, the committee meetings. I guess people are wondering, where can we find these committee meetings if they're live streamed? Of course, the association will most certainly share as many of these live streams as we can and make them accessible. But if I could take that question a step further, the documents that you showed us, the receipts, if you will, that you shared with all of us today, are those available for us to read? Is this public, or available to the public? Is there a website where we can see them or read them?
Yeah, let me put on my preacher cap for a minute.
Yes.
There's only two copies of this report that I know of. One is in the Legislative Archive building, and one was at my father's office at my parents' house. And so I literally was walking past his desk as I was cleaning the office out. I saw this report, and I said, I don't feel like reading this report because I don't know what it was about. It just had this title. So, you get that nudge from the Lord that says, hey, man, read the report. And that's why I got the report and read it. And this became the catalyst, because the beauty of it is this isn't a report like a book report that the two college students did or an outside report. This was a convened committee of the House Representatives in 1970. So someone might say, well, if they ignored it in 1970, then why can't they ignore it now? Technology is different now. You can't ignore committees being live streamed. You can't ignore voices crying out that this is going to be rectified. And so that's the difference for me. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to make some copies of this report and have some relevant parts of it available for those to distribute, so you can really see even the bill from 1913 that details. And I'm going to tell you something. As we were having discussions with the THEC a couple of years back, they kept saying, you keep saying the breakdown is 75%, 25%, but where is it? I said, I don't know. I don't have the actual bill that has it, but I know that that's the breakdown. And through the committee work, one of the research analysts brought us the legislation showing that it was written in 1913. And even to Dr. Glover's point, showing that TSU's money first went to the state treasurer before it went to TSU. And so then we discovered a bill from 1977 showing where it finally went directly to TSU. And these were the federal funds. And so we haven't even got to the federal funds. These are just state funds I'm talking about right now. And so we're going to make those documents available, but you can live stream. You can see the previous live stream committee meetings. And I just brace you for that meeting where the budget presentation comes up, because you'll see the huge disparities between the land grant funding for the 1862 land grant and the 1890 land grant. And it's our time. While I still have my preacher cap on, I'll remind you that God has always been on the side of the oppressed, and we will get through this thing together.
Amen.
Amen.
Joy, you mentioned something earlier about it being on TSU to provide the information. Well, that's true, and that's partly true because they keep asking certain things. In fact, late in November and December, the question when Dr. Love first broke it on TV that they owed us money, the treasurer started calling TSU. When did we not give you money? When did the money start coming to you directly? So people stopped working and start researching. I said, "What are you doing?" They said, "Well, the treasurer has a question, and we're trying to find." I said, "No, you have to finish doing your own work here at TSU. We have enough to do. We can't fight their battle. They can find out when they stop giving us money. They can find out when they didn't give us money. That is not our role to go and look that up and make their case for them." And and I'm saying that liberally on this air, that it wasn't our role to go in and do that for the state at the state level. We have enough at TSU to do to keep ourselves alive and afloat, not to come back and do state work. And so I think they found a way to go around and do it themselves to find out information. But you're right, the expectation is for TSU to do certain things. And we have done the initial work to get that $38 million that's scheduled done. And that was not easy to do. And so I guess it was double checked all that, but that was the piece of work that got us started. When I got there in 2013, that's the first project we worked on. And it took a while to get it done, a couple of years, matter of fact. And that went through 2016. We talked to the governor in 2017. And I think we got the first time 2018. So it's been the third year we got our full match. Because Representative Love, Senator Gilmore at that time, Senator Harper, Representative Gilmore, 4 of us went and talked to the governor, the then governor, and he said he just wasn't aware of it. He wasn't aware that we had not ever gotten our match. He vowed to do something about it. So we did get the match for the first time, but it was all because of those efforts that happened. When people say we go and have TSU at the Capitol, we don't just go and take a picture. We go and meet with people and say, "Listen, here's what you have not done over the years. Here's what we need." So it was a lot of meetings and going back and forth and talking to them and say, "Here's what we can do with it. What are you going to do with the money? What are you going to do with the money?" Let's not be unintelligent about it. Let's just keep this conversation on a level where we can both be respectful. Never ask a college president what you're going to do with the money.
All right.
So, but that was the thrust of asking us to do so much just to get it started. But we're glad we did, because that became the foundation for getting. I think you got us $2 million last year, year before last.
Yes, ma'am.
$2 million, and then more is coming once we get the numbers straight. Because we got some plans about how we're going to do it that we can't disclose yet. Because we got some real thoughts on we've had with board members. And so we're just looking forward to it and looking forward to your help once we get it together. It's going to be more than just a current Glenda Glover and President's cabinet problem. It's going to be an initiative we're going to need the alumni to work with us on, because there's so much strength in number and there's so much strength in unity, there's so much strength in working together. People built the walls of Jerusalem because they had a mind to work and they worked together. They even told him, "Come down off this wall." He said, "No, I will not come down. I have work until this work is done. So we're going to stay on this wall until we get this work done."
Yeah.
If I can, I may use that.
All right.
Let me also.
I tell y'all every time we have an event that's live stream, I'm Baptist, okay?
Let me also
do it.
pause here and again thank the alumni and thank those who always come down for TSU Day on the Hill. Just to understand this, again, there are 99 House members who come from 99 districts. And so for many of them, the issue was they thought we were just asking for money for Tennessee State. They didn't understand the land grant piece. And that's the case we had to keep making, which is, no, this is a law. This is not us asking for money like University of Tennessee at Martin. It's not us asking for money like Memphis State or Austin P or Tennessee Tech. This is money that is owed. And so that's helped shape the conversation, to have TSU Day on the Hill, to have these conversations, to say to them, listen, this is a bigger issue than just a university looking for some money.
Good.
Well, today has been transformative, I think, for a lot of alums who have saw the little press murmurs and read about it, and a lot of different little articles ran about the local press. And as it got more attention and got to some national blogs around HBCU culture, like Dr. Glover said, a lot of HBCUs, I know I've received a lot of phone calls from a lot of my counterparts across the South, really looking at this as a model, and what TSU is doing, and also how our alumni are acting, and making sure that we are also mobilizing. And like Charles, President Galbraith said, was to make sure we're educated, and when we're communicating with people. And I think that's truly essential for how as we move forward, is to make sure that we are not just putting numbers out there. We are waiting for the committee to come back with their potential, with their full money, and understanding that report. And then, as we move forward, we understand, if we come collectively and go in one voice, I think it will assist our needs and get what we need to be done. And so I want to thank each president for coming on, and as well as Dr. Love and Representative Love. We thank you for coming in, and thanking my co-host, Ms. Joy Pig of the Communications Committee, and I want to thank the Programming Committee, and myself, as relates to helping put it together. So we want to thank you three for helping this effort. And so there is a comment there. It links to, in the comments, it gave the particular link of how to go back and watch the live streams. We'll put this on our Facebook page. You can go there on both the Young Alumni page as well as the National Alumni Association page. And we look forward to having more discussions around Far From Normal, TSU's quest for land grant equity. So thank each one of you so much for participating in this, and we look forward for justice to come.
If I could add very quick, I know there's some comments about money for UT, Memphis, and Austin P. TSU and UT are the only schools that have a one-to-one match requirement. So I don't want us to get confused and think that other schools have it out there.
Gotcha. Well, thank you very much for addressing that.
All right, so just to kind of neatly tie everything in a bow, because I see there's some people who are just jumping in and going back and forth. So to neatly tie things in a bow, we do not know a final number yet. We're still working on that, correct?
Right.
Correct.
Okay, so we're still working on a number. The next committee hearing is in March.
No, the next one is in February, probably toward the end, when UT will come and testify about what they've done with their land grant money. But the budget presentation of the money that's owed, that was held back, will be in March.
Will be in March. Okay.
And I'll give you enough heads up about that. I'll give you like a 2-week notice about when that's going to be.
Great. Awesome.
It's usually going to be on a Monday.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Well, if all hearts and minds are clear.
All right. I think someone's asking what the penalty take questions. Is that, do you all have time for that, or what?
Drove right to the heart of the matter.
Right.
How much we owe, and when we find out.
But I certainly want to thank you all. I'm the National Alumni Association president, and each of you are prestigious alumni. And I just thank you all for the work that you're doing and how you represent Tennessee State University. This feels good. This conversation feels good. And this is what our TSU family looks like. Tigers working with Tigers and for Tigers. And so I'm very proud of tonight. This is the first of many discussions that we want to definitely have, so that we can be educated and we can be a strong voice. So thank you. And I definitely want to thank all of our membership for tuning in. I'm receiving a lot of texts, a lot of comments on the side, and people are enjoying this because it feels good to have information. So I appreciate all of you all for being a part of tonight.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Go Big Blue.
All right.
Go Big Blue.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
How do you get out of here? Let's see. How do you get out?
That concludes our presentation for TSU NAA Live. Please follow us at the Tennessee State University National Alumni Association on our Facebook and YouTube page. Thank you. Have a great night.